Well, I hate New Year's. I really do. See, in Missouri, where I live, before that, it gets cold before Christmas, and the cold has a purpose, and it has a meaning, and it kind of puts us all in the holiday spirit. And comes Christmas, and then comes New Year's, and then the cold is just cold. There's no purpose behind it. There's no meaning behind it. It's just nasty cold. However, I've been trying to recognize the blessing that this cold brings me, because it forces me to stay home more. It forces me to stay inside more. It forces me to spend time with my family and to notice more about them and about me and about our home and about what we share. So that's what I'm going to try to do when I get back to Missouri, is use this season to notice more. So we'll see if I can do that or not. And it's sort of we're in an odd time, because we're sort of, for those of us who follow the liturgical calendar, we're entering into this weird pause, this season between seasons. We're just about done with Christmas, and we know that Lent's coming, but I don't really know what to do with the next couple months. And I think that this season between seasons is an opportunity to stop and to notice, where are we? What is new about this place? What is new about this time? What are some things that perhaps we had never truly seen before? And I think that the Apostle Paul can be a good guide for us in the midst of this season of noticing. So I want to explore a passage from 1 Corinthians with you. And I want to talk to you about noticing. I want to talk to you about foolishness. I want to talk to you about wisdom. I want to talk to you about turtles. And then I want to talk to you about chickens. So, Paul writes this in 1 Corinthians chapter 1. For the message about the cross is foolishness to those who are perishing. But to us who are being saved, it is the power of God. For it is written, I will destroy the wisdom of the wise, and the discernment of the discerning I will thwart. And then Paul writes, for God's foolishness is wiser than human wisdom, and God's weakness is stronger than human strength. Now, it ought to be said that Paul is not talking about education when he talks about wisdom. This passage has been used in certain circles as an indictment against education, as if education is a bad thing. That's not what Paul's talking about. See, Paul is writing on the cusp of what's called the Second Sophistic Movement. This was a period of time when the most popular people in the land, the people who would grace the cover of People magazine, were these wisdom teachers called the sophists. And these sophists were so popular that they would draw these large crowds, and they also tended to attract these disciples. And in fact, attachment to a certain sophist was a huge way to achieve a high social rank. And in fact, these various cliques of these various sophists had started to incorporate into the Corinthian church. And Paul writes that he is noticing that their association with wisdom is beginning to divide them. It is this cliquish wisdom that Paul rails against, not academics. Paul is rightly indignant against a form of wisdom that divides people into wise or unwise. And while Paul is not railing against education, it can be a form of social status in our society still. Most of us here have either been to seminary or have graduated seminary, and that's wonderful. It's a great gift. I work for a seminary, and I love the school I work for. However, often I find myself only listening to people based on where they went to school. Something I have to watch out in my own life. Paul seeks to help the Corinthian church to understand that a wisdom in which people are divided into worthy or unworthy, intelligent or unintelligent, is no wisdom at all. And in fact, in our passage, Paul mocks this form of elitist wisdom by setting it up against what he calls the foolishness of the cross. So what is this foolishness of the cross? Well, for we Christians in the first world, We tend to see this foolishness in terms of very individualistic hope of forgiveness of sins and eternal life in the next world and all that. The problem with viewing the cross solely through this lens is that this can easily lull us into a complacency and does not require us to apply the foolishness of the cross to our everyday lives, to our everyday choices, to our ethics. We are not allowing the cross to transform us when we are just waiting for the by and by in the sky. Perhaps the true foolishness of the cross is transformation. Not heavenly transformation, transformation in this life, today, now. Perhaps the wisdom of the world is to maintain the status quo, whereas the foolishness of God, the foolishness of the cross, is always seeking the redemptive change. Foolish transformation. And maybe for those who live in the two-thirds of our world, without all the socioeconomic amenities that you and I enjoy, God's foolishness still holds hope for this life. In those contexts, the cross is not merely about the individual's otherworldly destination, but still speaks a prophetic dream of liberation from slavery to the world's cycles of destruction and into a hopeless cycle. The cross offers a promise of transformation, not only of the person, but of the person's world. So what does this foolish transformation look like in our context? And I want to give you maybe two examples. One is about turtles, and one is about chickens. I think this foolishness can break into the world in small ways, and that's about turtles. I recently read a story that I just have grown to love. Shortly before his death a few years ago, Bishop Bob Anderson told about when he was first elected bishop of a diocese in northern Minnesota. The first thing he wanted to do was to visit all of the churches in his diocese. And he felt it was important that what they wanted from a bishop is they wanted a well-educated, up-to-date bishop. So he would listen to CDs and lectures on theology and educational philosophy, family systems theory, and economics as he was driving to these different parishes. And so he was so full of all of this knowledge that whenever he would visit a parish and they would want him to speak, he would just sort of disgorge all this information onto these people, and he just watched their eyes go blank. And it was obvious this is not what they needed from their bishop. One morning, as he was driving to one of his churches, he saw ahead of him a shape on the road. Drawing closer, he saw it was a box turtle, and it was trying to get across the road, and because it's a turtle, it's not going to make it before it gets smashed. He braked, he got out, and he picked up the turtle, and he safely put the turtle on the other side of the road. And as he continued to visit churches, he started keeping his eye out for turtles. And there were a lot of them, on or near the roads in need of rescue. It kind of became his practice to watch for them, and to stop and pick them up if they needed help. After a while, he stopped listening to the lectures, because he might miss a turtle. And he started leaving the windows open so he could smell the summer air. See, Bob discovered that he was more relaxed, that he was more patient when he arrived at a church, and that this is what people needed from their bishop, not his take on current events or theology. Paul speaks to a foolishness that challenges a wisdom based on status, rank, and achievement. He writes, God's foolishness is wiser than human wisdom, and God's weakness is stronger than human strength. Maybe, perhaps, if we were to stop, notice, and pick up a few turtles, we would better embrace this transforming foolishness of God. So I believe we can be transformed in small ways, in the ways that we notice in being more patient. I think there's also some bigger communal, corporate, societal ways that we ought to think about changing. 4 years ago, my wife Jess made the decision to become a vegetarian. She had done some research, and it began as a decision based on health, but it soon grew into a really ethical passion of hers. She believed that the way that animals were being treated in the meat business was wrong and immoral. And when she first made her decision, our families didn't really understand. My mom still made stuff with chicken broth and all that. Our church didn't understand. People started making jokes about how, oh, we gotta have 2 dishes now. And I didn't understand. We're from Kansas City, and I don't want to offend anybody, but we have the best barbecue in the world. And so I would eat my barbecue in front of my wife with great relish. And I was being very kind to her. And living out the goodness within her, Jess would just smile and shake her head. She has never made me feel cruel or inferior because I have not joined her. She is one of those rare, kind vegetarians. And I believe that we were doomed to have 2 separate dishes at our table for the rest of our lives. But lately, I have to admit to you, I cannot shake a feeling. Recently, a friend of mine got me a gift. It's a book about chickens called Chicken. And this book chronicles everything you would ever want to know about chickens, including their place in our society today. The chicken is arguably the most abused animal on the planet. In the United States alone, we kill 8 to 10 billion chickens every year. By the way, breaking that down into population, that means that you ate 35 whole chickens last year. And I ate 35 whole chickens last year. 35. And many of these chickens are not mercifully killed, by the way. They spend their short lives in what are called CAFOs, concentrated animal feeding operations, which are dark, dense silos. These chickens are so pumped full of steroids that their legs cannot support their synthetically obese bodies. They spend 6 weeks before they're sent to the slaughterhouse. A chicken under normal circumstances, by the way, lives 6 to 7 years. After 6 weeks, they're sent to the slaughterhouse where many have their beaks clipped with no anesthetic. And their beaks are clipped to keep them from pecking themselves or other chickens out of insanity. So they're sent to these slaughterhouses where many are scalded alive before they're eviscerated, chopped up, and placed in vacuum-sealed cellophane packages that are designed to lull you and I into forgetting that these used to be living things. And the only reason that we all tolerate this, by the way, is because we think of the chicken as dispensable, as just another commodity. That's the wisdom of the world. Productivity, efficiency. Maybe the foolishness of God, maybe the gospel even extends to chickens. Even to the point where we need to begin to think, does our compassion have limits? And just because we can do something, does that mean we should? Maybe this season between seasons is a time for us to notice whether or not we are participants in the foolishness of our God or in the wisdom of the culture that surrounds us. In her book, Christianity for the Rest of Us, Diana Butler Bass writes that transformation is the promise at the heart of the Christian life. So may we be transformed. May we stop to help the turtles cross the road. May we be more aware of the hidden violence in our society. May we allow the foolish cross to change and transform us. Amen.